In office. The president tweeting, quote, "I hope everyone is having a great Christmas. Then tomorrow it's back to work in order to make America great again," which is happening faster than anyone anticipated. President Trump and the First Lady spent the day spreading holiday cheer at Mar-a-Lago. They personally provided hundreds of Christmas dinners to Secret Service, White House officials, and military members protecting the First family. First Lady Melania Trump, take a look, tweeting a festive selfie showing her wearing a Santa hat and some reindeer flying behind her with the caption, #Merry Christmas.
All right, we've got a couple of tough stories we have to get to. A Fox News alert, a tragedy on Christmas Day. A father accused of killing his 11-year-old child and infant and their mother at a Phoenix apartment. Police say the suspect barricaded himself inside of that apartment for hours, then spraying bullets at officers during an apparent domestic dispute. One officer, also hit by shrapnel, is in stable condition. The accused shooter is in custody. Just a terrible story there. And another family facing a tragedy here on Christmas. We're learning the identity of a California Highway Patrol officer killed in a crash by a suspected drunk driver. Officer Andrew Camilleri was in his parked patrol car with his partner on Christmas Eve when they were hit by another car that was speeding on a San Francisco highway. Officials say the 22-year-old driver of that car was under the influence of alcohol and possibly also marijuana. Camilleri was with the force for just over a year. He leaves behind a wife and 3 kids who were expecting him home just a few hours later to open up Christmas presents.
Today we lost not only a hero, but a son, a brother, husband, and a father to a senseless act and an irresponsible decision. Many families have been impacted by this incident.
It's just a terrible story. Camilleri's partner suffered minor injuries. The driver is facing felony charges.
That's terrible. North Korea denying it was behind a massive cyber attack and demanding the U.S. prove otherwise. An ambassador to the United Nations from the rogue regime saying Washington is lying about the so-called WannaCry ransomware attack in order to provoke North Korea. The hack infected thousands of computers worldwide, damaging businesses, banks, and hospitals in more than 150 countries. Well, the Pentagon is facing a new wave of foreign threats heading into 2018 from both North Korea and China amid the UN Security Council's decision to crank up sanctions. Lucas Tomlinson brings us the latest from the Pentagon.
The UN Security Council voted to crank up sanctions on the rogue communist regime. It's the first set of sanctions since North Korea's long-range missile test last month, which flew higher and longer than any in its history. Pyongyang responded in a statement Sunday. The vote was akin to war.
We define this sanctions resolution, rigged up by the United States and its followers, as an act of war, violating peace and stability.
Just one in a host of challenges facing the U.S. military around the world, as the Trump administration approves the shipment of anti-tank missiles to Ukraine capable of destroying Russian armor, a decision met with rare bipartisanship.
I support the administration's decision to provide these types of defensive weapons for the Ukrainians. It's a clear message to Russia that we will not allow them to continue to compromise the sovereignty of Ukraine.
In Yemen, the U.S. military has conducted more airstrikes in 2017 than the last 4 years combined against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and ISIS. Recent U.S. intelligence estimates indicate the terror group has doubled in Yemen over the past year, the situation taking on more urgency at the State Department as the civil war rages on.
It's in the United States' interest to see this conflict in Yemen brought to a close. Al-Qaeda benefits, Daesh benefits, Iran benefits. Not good for the United States.
A former senior director at the National Security Council also warns of an old foe taking root in Syria.
A lot of folks, when they think about al-Qaeda, probably still think of its center of gravity as being on that Afghanistan-Pakistan border. But I would think of the center of gravity for al-Qaeda really having shifted to Syria at this point.
This comes as China conducted full flight operations with its first aircraft carrier this past year. Beijing now boasts a fleet of warships similar in number to the U.S. Navy and will overtake the United States by 2030, according to experts.
I think China probably poses the greatest threat to our nation by about 2025.
The head of the U.S. Pacific Command has long complained about the shortage of attack submarines necessary to gain intelligence on China and North Korea. If Congress doesn't pass a budget next month, expect those shortages to continue. at the Pentagon. Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
A landing goes horribly wrong thanks to icy conditions in Boston. Take a look. A JetBlue plane packed with people slipping off the runway and spinning 180 degrees before finally coming to rest between two runways. No one was hurt on the flight from Georgia, but passengers say it felt like the plane was doing donuts. But they did praise the pilot and crew for handling the situation. Everyone on board safely evacuated and the plane was towed to the terminal.
All right, NBC issuing new strict anti-sexual harassment rules just weeks after Today Show co-host Matt Lauer was fired. Page 6 claims that employees are required to report any inappropriate behavior now and could be fired if they are found to be covering up for colleagues. Other rules say how coworkers should socialize with each other and even how to hug correctly. Lauer was fired from the network last month for inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace.
Well, certainly wasn't pretty, but the Philadelphia Eagles now have home field advantage throughout the NFL playoffs.
This direction, made from 35. That one's heading down the middle, and good!
Ah, nice. Kicker Jake Elliott sealing the deal late in the fourth quarter against the Oakland Raiders. Eagles go on to win 19-10. To the AFC, the Steelers dropping a lump of coal in the Texans' stocking. Pittsburgh running all over Houston, 34-6. But the one bright spot for the Texans, look at this awesome touchdown catch by receiver DeAndre Hopkins, battling the ball around and then turning around just to make the grab there. Obviously, celebration after the fact. But some of these catches are pretty impressive. Like,
did he get penalized for that, throwing the ball out?
I don't think so. You're allowed to celebrate now.
You're allowed to celebrate.
Rules,
Okay,
yeah,
so
the
that's
rules have changed in the last year.
Who knows? There's so many rules with the NFL.
I know.
All right, 9 minutes after the hour, after two ISIS-inspired terror attacks inside the U.S. in just the last few months, how is the terror group changing tactics for their future plots? General Anthony Tata joins us with the top threats to 2018.
And still no actual proof of Russia collusion within the Trump campaign, but could there be proof of corruption inside the FBI? The new Republican plan to turn the tables.
And Rosie O'Donnell is just so mad that we can't even believe it. Wait until you hear her Christmas message to House Speaker Paul Ryan. Stay tuned. Well, there is a war coming. One of the Marine Corps' highest-ranking generals now warning that the U.S. could be on the brink of major conflicts with Russia and in the Pacific theater as well.
So how prepared are we, and do we have a reason to be worried? Joining us now is former Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Forces in Afghanistan and author of the new book, Direct Fire, that comes out today, General Anthony Tata. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for giving us a copy here of your book that comes out today. We appreciate it.
Right, thank you, sir.
So let's talk about, threats that we may face in 2018. You just heard what Rob said there about, being on the brink of war. Do you think that's true?
Well, Jill and Rob, thanks for having me this morning. I think if we look at the Trump national security strategy, it lays out all of the threats that we are going to probably face in the next year to 5 years. And it talks about prosperity, it talks about protection, and it talks about peace through strength. But one of the things I like about it is that it talks about pursuing the enemy to their source, and whether that's cyber, whether that's transnational actors, or whether that's people like Kim Jong-un or the Russians, as you said in the lead-in, up there in Estonia and all the nations up in that northeast portion of Europe. And the threats are real, and they're out there, and they've been ignored for a long time. And so that's why everything seems to be coming to a head right now. I would say the North Korean Peninsula, the Korean Peninsula in North Korea is probably #1 right now in the information war that's going back and forth. And then when you look at Hamza bin Laden coming out, bin Laden's son, Osama bin Laden's son, trying to unify all the transnational actors that are Arab and trying to destroy the United States or United States property. That's pursuing them to the source. ISIS reconvening in Libya, and we've got all of the drones going after that. So there's threats everywhere that we are fighting, but this new national security strategy is a good one, and I think that's going to help us focus better on threats that face our country.
Yeah, well, I certainly think that America has more confidence in its military, and we definitely feel bolder than we have in the last 8 years. But I also think that a lot of people, and myself included, feel like that we're sitting on a powder keg right now. We have so many different conflicts around the world. And I want to ask you, the decision that we made just recently, moving the embassy into Jerusalem, has really angered a lot of Muslims around the world. Was that the right time? Was this the right choice to make
I think it is, Rob. I think it's time for America to reassert its strength. One of the things that you saw during the Obama administration was this sort of, President Obama's policy was a weaker America makes for a stronger world. President Trump has a very different policy. A stronger America makes for a stronger world, peace through strength, and asserting ourselves where we need to assert ourselves in the Middle East is important. Show leadership in the Middle East and demonstrate that we are protecting our allies. Israel is one of our longest standing allies in the region. So I think not only is it a symbolic move, but it's a very real move diplomatically when you think about the elements of national power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. This is a diplomatic and informational element of power come into play in the Middle East, where we are saying we are going to assert ourselves very strongly in an area that is very contentious, and we are a player and we are here to stay.
Before we let you go, we're talking about what's going on overseas. Let's talk about here at home for just a second, because, ISIS had threatened, Christmas in New York, right?
Yeah,
next thing coming up in the immediate days is New Year's Eve, and you have a lot of people gathering at a lot of different locations. Do you feel that we are prepared here at home?
Jillian, I think so, because I have great confidence in our law enforcement personnel here. Despite all the machinations up at the upper levels of the FBI and the bureaucrats up there, down at the lower levels, NYPD and the local police forces all around the country, they're fantastic. They go after threats. They have great intelligence networks, and they will protect us. And I think the American people should be very proud of the law enforcement personnel that we have.
All right. And you have a website, by the way, you wanted to tell us about before we run.
Well, we're sending books to troops overseas, the USO, the Pat Tillman Center. Just go to ajtata.com, and you can find it there to get direct fire over to the troops. I'll sign copies and send them over there.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us this morning.
General, thank you.
Appreciate it. It is 18 minutes after the hour. A white Christmas turns into whiteout conditions for a major chunk of the country, where it's heading as you head back to work. We are tracking the latest.
Oh, yeah, I saw this one yesterday. This was so cool. The Navy mom who got the best Christmas surprise ever. An angry passenger demanding a written apology after she claims United Airlines gave her first-class seat, stole it from her, and then gave it to a Democratic congresswoman. Jean Marie Simon says that Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee took her spot after United mistakenly thought that Simon canceled her flight to D.C. Well, she was given a new seat and a $500 travel voucher to make up for it, but Simon says that's not enough, writing on Facebook, "I have received no written apology from United. A representative at a call center responding to a complaint form that I filled out online personally apologized." Simon believes she may have been bumped on that flight so the congresswoman could get special treatment. Jackson Lee denies those claims, saying, quote, "I asked for nothing exceptional or out of the ordinary and received nothing exceptional or out of the ordinary."
The Secret Service has interviewed the man who claims he sent Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin a gift-wrapped box of horse manure. Los Angeles psychologist Robert Strong posting photos on social media of himself with the package. He also sent a card reading, quote, "We are returning the gift of the Christmas tax bill. It's horse expletive," and signed it, "The American People." In a Christmas message, Strong compared himself and his act to Jesus.
The prophets of old often did shocking things to highlight the injustice against which they were preaching. For me, that was delivering a gift-wrapped box of horse.
There you have it. No charges have been filed against him.
He's very proud of himself. All right, Rosie O'Donnell sending a not-so-warm Christmas message to House Speaker Paul Ryan. Hey, Jillian.
Oh, hey, it's my turn. My turn to read. The comedian tweeting, quote, "Paul Ryan, don't talk about Jesus. After what you just did to our nation, you will go straight to hell. You screwed up fake altar boy. Hashtag Judas Much." O'Donnell's harsh words in response to a Christmas message from Ryan just days after the GOP successfully passed tax reform. Rob.
Yes, just last week, Rosie made headlines when she offered cash, millions of to Republican Senators Jeff Flake and Susan Collins, the moderates of the Republicans, on Twitter to vote against the tax bill. Rosie O'Donnell is very, very angry these days.
Very angry.
I hope she can learn to relax and just, go sit on a beach somewhere. All right, a white Christmas for many in the Northeast and the Midwest, but was it too much? Look at this. Heavy snow causing whiteout conditions at Boston Logan Airport.
And more than 21 inches of snow pounding Erie, Pennsylvania, breaking a Christmas Day record. Adam Klotz is here tracking what you need to know as you head out today. Take it away, Adam, so I can wake up.
Oh, is it my turn now?
It is.
Is that how this works? Okay. Yeah, I think probably if you were shoveling this, for some folks it was too much, and there are areas where the snow is going to continue. Basically just all around the Great Lakes, especially downwind from Ontario and Erie, areas where we could still see an additional, in some cases, 1 feet to 2 feet of snow before it's all said and done. No surprise here. That's why we have winter storm watches and warnings stretching all along these areas, especially up and down the coast of Michigan. Otherwise, though, the big story is just going to be these temperatures. Absolutely frigid. These are temps up into Canada, if you needed a reason not to live in Canada. Negative 50 degrees. Negative 30 degrees. This is settling down into the States. It feels like, these are feels like temperatures, feels like negative 20 in Chicago right now, guys.
Fun.
I heard the 3-week summer in Canada is just lovely. I really heard it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. It is 25 minutes after the hour. America's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem about to spark a domino effect around the world. Our next guest says it's proof America is done leading from behind.
And 'tis the season for returns. We're helping you read the fine print to make the most of the unwanted gifts. All right, America leads, and could the rest of the world be soon to follow? Guatemala becomes the first nation to announce that it will also be moving its embassy to Jerusalem.
And it's sparking a domino effect as other nations now consider making the move. Is this proof that the president's foreign policy strategy is already working? Joining us this morning is the managing director of the Israel Project, Amr Saran. Thank you for joining us this morning. So what do you think? Is this proof that other people are taking notice and following?
I mean, it's definitely proof that the conversation is moving in the direction that the president wanted. Is it going to open the floodgates? Is it going to be a trickle? Those are things that we'll have to wait and see. But what this does show is that when the United States takes the lead, other people follow, and things fall into place for us. It's not just this embassy thing. There's been a bunch of developments in just the last few days at the United Nations, and in the Middle East, people are starting to, again, kind of settle down and line up behind the United States and the kinds of things that we're trying to accomplish over there.
It is good to see that, and good to see support for Israel that has very few friends around the world. But I do think there are a lot of countries that probably do have a healthy respect for Israel that are just scared about stirring the pot in this manner and scared about all the anger that this could stir up. What do you think on that? I mean, a lot of people decided not to vote on this resolution. A lot of countries.
That's exactly the right. That's exactly the right way to approach this. Sometimes we'll get countries to go along with us, and sometimes we'll be able to get countries to just sit on the sidelines. But, the thing that we've seen really over the last 48 hours and even 24 hours is exactly this sort of dynamic, which is people having to decide whether they want to continue actively opposing the United States or simply follow where the President and Ambassador Haley have been leading. And one of the really interesting things that we've been seeing really just in the last 24 hours is you're seeing Arab leaders, Saudi leaders, Jordanian leaders, Egyptian leaders begin to talk to reporters and to say, you know what, this just wasn't worth the cost of alienating the United States. The Palestinians are throwing a temper tantrum, and it's time for everybody to get back to acting like adults.
You mentioned Ambassador Nikki Haley. It came out on Sunday that the U.S. negotiated a $285 million cut in the UN's budget for the next year. How big of a deal do you think that is?
It's a big deal on its own. Listen, $285 million here, $285 million there begins to add up. It's a big deal on its own. But even more significantly, what this shows is that there hasn't been a backlash to the way that the U.S. approached our embassy in Jerusalem. We heard everywhere. We saw the vote. We heard the U.S. is going to be isolated. But in fact, since the vote happened, Ambassador Haley has shepherded through 2 different resolutions through the Security Council, one on North Korea, one on foreign fighters, where we got votes that were 15-0. Right. They were unanimous. They went the way we wanted.
Yeah,
and then this cut.
And that was, especially with the North Korea one, it was great to see everybody kind of together on that, a 15-0 vote there. You know, it's $285 million, but more so, it really does represent something, and that is, do you think that the UN as a body has any respect for the sovereignty of Israel?
No, there's no way to say that the UN is anything but overwhelmingly hostile to the Israelis. You know, you see these figures that 70% to 85% of resolutions on any given year that condemn countries are condemning Israel. Now, the question, you know, taking a step back, we can get into the minutia, this resolution, that resolution, but does it really sound right that 80% of the condemnations from the United Nations should be targeting Israel in a world where we know what's happening in Syria, we know what's happening in Yemen, we know that the Iranians are steamrolling across the region. The UN is just hopelessly biased against Israel, and one of the things that we're seeing is the Trump administration broadly and the President and Ambassador Haley specifically just refusing to play these games anymore and just calling people out.
All right. Well, it's interesting stuff. The UN under fire from the Trump administration. Omri, thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks as always.
All right. Well, the FBI, with their backs against the wall, admitting they still cannot verify the Trump dossier. House and Senate investigators tell the Washington Times none of the big Trump-Russia collusion claims have been verified. This comes 17 months after the DNC-funded dossier partially prompted this big FBI investigation into Russia and the Trump campaign. Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe grilled on Capitol Hill last week 2 separate times about 16 total hours that he had to spend in the hot seat. Congressman Devin Nunes is reportedly preparing a report on FBI corruption with other GOP members for next year. The biggest challenger that Russian President Vladimir Putin has ever faced for re-election is now banned from running against him. Election officials voting unanimously that Alexei Navalny is unfit to run due to a fraud conviction. Navalny says this is all corruption. It's all a ploy to keep Putin in power, and he wants his supporters to boycott the presidential vote that comes in March. Putin is anticipated to win by a very large margin on his way to a 4th term.
A holiday fireworks celebration goes terribly wrong. Just take a look. Geez, at least 22 people, including 6 children, were burned in central Cuba when those fireworks started exploding uncontrollably. The display, part of a traditional Christmas Eve celebration that draws thousands each year. Well, they weren't home to leave him milk and cookies, but Santa Claus still paid a visit to a group of fearless firefighters. Old St. Nick and Mrs. Claus posing for a picture you can see right here with the Ventura County Fire Department in California. Santa saying he knows a little bit about working during the holidays. Nearly 2,000 firefighters spent Christmas away from their families, battling the massive Thomas wildfire. It's the largest in California history.
All right, a big moment for soon-to-be royal Meghan Markle with her fiancé by her side. Prince Harry offering a nervous Markle some last-minute words of advice before she had to curtsy for Queen Elizabeth. I think that'd make anybody a little bit nervous. The former American actress and the royal family had just left Christmas service at the Queen's country estate. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will be married on May 19th. That's going to be a fun wedding. I want to go to his bachelor party is where I want to be.
I'm sure you do.
It's the best Christmas gift that this Navy sailor's mom could ever ask for.
So she was instructed to unwrap a full-length mirror as a Christmas present, revealing her daughter standing right behind her. The video of their emotional reunion has gone viral with more than 7 million views. Never gets old, I tell you, seeing these videos.
That was a really good one.
Yeah.
They really got her good. She was shocked. All right, 37 minutes after the hour, it has been a Democrat rallying cry since Inauguration Day.
Rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the president.
Is there any hope for the so-called resistance in 2018 to come to an end, or could we soon start seeing some reaching across the aisle? Could politicians start getting along in Washington? We debate coming up next.
And police have some questions for the person behind the wheel of this car, the crash that appears to defy gravity.
Motives and his actions are contemptible, and I will fight every day until he is impeached. Impeach 45.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
The president's fitness for office is something that is being called into question. I'm very worried about his fitness.
All right, President Trump will begin 2018 with a massive legislative victory under his belt, uniting Republicans, and they did finally come through on tax reform. It was a huge promise. But the only thing that appears to be uniting the Democrats right now, or one of the only things, is a major desire to shut down any progress in Washington by this administration. They simply just want to say no. Is there any hope that they will give up this so-called resistance to the right now? Joining me now to debate this is GOP strategist Jen Kearns and liberal analyst Kathy Aru. Ladies, thanks so much for coming on this morning. Kathy, we'll start with you. The resistance, does this just continue on as it has for the last year?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like the Tea Party. The Tea Party never stopped while Obama was in office, and that was, everyone considered it a silly movement, but they grew stronger and stronger. We had the birther movement that Trump liked to be part of, and that was a silly movement, and that didn't die down, and now Trump is in office. So I don't see how this is any different.